This is Seller Legal, and we're going to be discussing employment cases breakdown and the top 5 reasons employees file claims. So to begin, how often do people file claims against employers? Well, the data shows, according to the EEOC, that there are over 89,385 total charges filed in 2015, with 356.6 million paid out in employee-filed claims. And where did the most claims take place? According to the data, charge receipts by state and basis for 2014 from the EEOC, Texas was in the lead with 8,035 total charges, Florida with 7,528, California 6,363, Georgia 4,820, and Illinois 4,487. And what are the most common claim resolutions? The resolutions by type have no reasonable cause as the leading resolution in charges filed, whereas administrative closures and settlements come in next with a little under 10%, followed by, there's also merit resolutions, forgive me, at 18%, and then followed by withdrawal with benefits, reasonable cause, successful conciliations, and unsuccessful conciliations. What are the most common reasons employees file claims? The top 5 employment issues based on race charges in 2015 revolved around discharge, harassment, terms and conditions, discipline, and promotion. While the top 5 employment issues based on sex charges in 2015 revolved around harassment, discharge, terms and conditions, sexual harassment, and promotion. The top 5 employment issues based on national origin in 2015 revolved around discharge, harassment, terms and conditions, discipline, and hiring. And the top 5 employment issues based on religion charges in 2015 revolved around discharge, harassment, terms and conditions, posting notices, and discipline. And lastly, the top 5 issues based on retaliation charges in 2015 revolved around discharge, harassment, terms and conditions, discipline, and posting notices. And what are their basis for complaint? By issue, for fiscal year 2015, race had over 65,168 claims filed, with race being the basis, sex being the basis of 62,280, national origin at 21,589, religion 7,735, color was the basis for claims of claim charges for 6,551 cases, while retaliation came in at 88,957 charges with retaliation as the basis. And by issue, the ADEA had 37,846 claims, the ADA 56,515, and the EPA 1,763. And the most common cases filed after managers cross the line? Most commonly, retaliation, discrimination, sexual harassment, and unpaid wages. To give you an example, the difference between unfair versus illegal workplace practices with regards to a retaliation case. An example of unfair would be after taking an approved medical leave, you were told you don't have a job to come back to. You were employed by a covered employer but hadn't yet been on the job for the required 12 months, 1,250 hours of service, or work at a location with at least 50 employees within 75 miles. While unfair, it is not illegal. While an example of illegal would be you were told you don't have a job to return to after taking medical leave during your second year on the job, you meet FMLA protection requirements, and you work for a covered employer. Your employer felt you don't qualify because your 12 months of work history hasn't been consecutive. To give you 2 examples for discrimination cases, an unfair workplace violation, but unfair but not illegal. An example would be after years of hard work, you have a rough week for personal reasons and arrive late to work. It happens again the next week and you are terminated for it. As a woman of color, you think it is unfair and has to do with your race. The employer has also fired white employees after 2 late starts. Though unfair, perhaps, it's not illegal at that point. Whereas illegal an example of an illegal violation would be after years of hard work, you have a rough week for personal reasons and arrive late to work. It happens again the next week and you are terminated for it. As a woman of color, you think it is unfair and it has to do with your race. But in this case, white employees have been late consecutively and weren't fired for the same offense. An example of unfair versus illegal for sexual harassment. An unfair example is your company has an open door policy for sexual harassment. One day you get harassed or hear some rude sexual comments from a co-employee. Nobody else hears it, but you are so offended you quit without giving your company the chance to investigate because you cannot work with him anymore. Maybe unfair, but it's not illegal at that point. An illegal example would be one day your employer brings up possibly entering into a romantic relationship. You politely decline and everything seems fine. However, afterwards you notice a change in behavior. Though respectful, your performance reviews become negative and you get assigned unwelcome duties until you are ultimately let go. With regards to unpaid wages, an example of unfair treatment would be your employer makes you a non-exempt hourly employee work 12 hours a day the first 3 days of the week to prevent you from being paid time and one half for going over 40 hours. Your employer, as soon as you hit 40 hours, sends you home for the rest of the week and only pays you for the 40 hours because that's all you worked. An illegal violation example would be your employer assures you that you agreed to waive overtime pay or that you only qualify for paid overtime for approved hours. Your employer requires you to work over 40 hours per week, but paycheck after paycheck you aren't being compensated for the time spent. And your boss has a new excuse, pay period after pay period. And this would be an example of wage theft in the workplace. To learn more about your rights in the workplace,